Three best friends, one quiet Florida street, a random robbery, and a single gunshot that changed countless lives forever. This is the heartbreaking murder of Kayla Rincon-Miller. In July of 2026, a courtroom in Fort Myers, Florida, watched as 18-year-old Thomas Stein broke down in tears, begging a judge for one final mercy, just a single, last hug from his family before being sent away forever. But the judge didn't flinch. He said no. This was the final chapter of a high-profile case that shocked the community of Cape Coral. It's a story about a random, senseless act of violence over a cheap purse that cost a 15-year-old girl her life, fractured a community, and triggered a high-tech police hunt through digital breadcrumbs. But as the trial unfolded, the biggest question wasn't whether the crime happened. It was a brutal game of finger-pointing between two teenagers, both trying to escape a lifetime behind bars. Who actually pulled the trigger? And how did a simple night of breaking into parked cars turn into a cold-blooded murder? To understand the weight of this tragedy, we have to go back to Sunday night, March 17, 2024, in Cape Coral, Florida. It's St. Patrick's Day, but more importantly for the local kids, it's the very beginning of spring break. 15-year-old Kayla Rincon-Miller was a bright, popular teenager known for her infectious energy and her love for her family. That evening, Kayla and her two best friends, Emma Wright and Luann DJ, decided to celebrate the start of their school break by going out to see a movie at the Coralwood Shopping Center, right off the busy Del Prado Boulevard. The night was supposed to be completely ordinary. The girls hung out, watched their movie, and grabbed some snacks. Just before things took a dark turn, they were doing what any normal teenagers would do, recording goofy videos on their phones. In one heartbreaking video that would later be shown to a silent jury, Kayla is smiling, posing, and playfully walking down an imaginary runway while her friends cheer her on. It was a snapshot of pure, innocent teenage happiness. Around 9:40 p.m., the movie theater was winding down, and the girls realized they were hungry. They decided to walk over to a nearby McDonald's to get some food before heading home. Because the main boulevard was busy, they took a quieter, darker side street running adjacent to Del Prado Boulevard. It was an unlit stretch of road, shadowed by trees and suburban quiet. They had no idea that while they were walking and talking, a silver SUV was quietly hunting for a target just blocks away. Map graphic of Cape Coral, tracking a path from the Coralwood Shopping Center down the side streets near Del Prado Boulevard. A red pulsing dot represents the girls, and a gray moving icon represents the suspect vehicle. While Kayla and her friends were enjoying their night, another group of teenagers was out on the streets, but they had a very different agenda. Driving around in a silver SUV was 16-year-old Thomas Stein and his associate, 16-year-old Horne Jr. Now, the vehicle they were using is a critical detail in this case. It wasn't some stolen car or a beat-up teenager's ride. It was a late-model SUV that had been officially rented by Thomas Stein's mother. According to police records and later court testimonies, Stein had taken the keys to his mom's rental car, picked up Horne, and headed out into the night. But they weren't just joyriding. Prosecutors would later show that the teens were looking for trouble. They began their night across town in North Fort Myers. They pulled into the parking lot of a completely different movie theater there, looking for unlocked cars. Their plan at that point was what cops call car hopping, just walking through a lot, pulling on door handles, and stealing cash, electronics, or whatever else people left inside. But the North Fort Myers lot was a bust. They didn't find anything easy to steal. Frustrated but still looking for cash, Stein drove the rental SUV over the bridge and into Cape Coral. They cruised through another movie theater parking lot. At one point, they even idled near a bank ATM, openly discussing whether they should stick up a random person who was withdrawing cash. But they decided against it. The ATM was too well lit, and there were too many cameras. Then, as they cruised down the dark road near Del Prado Boulevard, their headlights caught something in the distance. Three young girls, walking alone in the dark, carrying purses. To the boys in the SUV, they didn't see three innocent children enjoying their spring break. They saw an easy target. Stylized dramatic recreation. The silver SUV passes the girls slowly. The camera zooms in on the taillights as the car brakes, then swings around in a hard U-turn. The girls noticed the SUV pass them. It was moving slowly, and the passengers inside were staring out the windows at them. At first, they didn't think much of it. Maybe it was just some kids from school being weird. But then, the SUV suddenly cut its wheels, performed a sharp U-turn, and came right back toward them. This time, the driver did something deliberate. He flipped on the vehicle's high beams, blinding the three girls completely. Imagine the sudden disorientation. You're on a pitch-black street, and suddenly a wall of white light hits your face. You can't see the car, you can't see the doors opening, and you have no idea who is stepping out into the dark. Emma and Luann would later testify that they thought it was a joke. They expected a classmate to pop out and yell, "Scared you?" But instead, two figures rushed out of the vehicle. They were wearing hoodies pulled tight and masks over their faces. One of them was holding a semi-automatic Glock pistol. In a split second, the prank turned into a nightmare. One of the masked boys blocked their path, pointing the gun directly at them, demanding that they hand over their bags. The girls froze. It was a moment of sheer panic. Kayla was holding her bag, and a brief, chaotic struggle broke out as the gunman tried to rip it from her hands. Then, a deafening blast shattered the quiet neighborhood. The screen cuts to absolute black for a beat. The sound of a single, sharp gunshot echoes, followed by the frantic, panicked screaming of teenage girls. The bullet was fired at point-blank range. Forensic evidence would later prove that the muzzle of the gun was just 2 to 3 centimeters away from Kayla's chest when the trigger was pulled. The bullet tore straight into her torso. Kayla collapsed onto the pavement instantly. Seeing her fall, the attackers panicked. They didn't even grab the bags they had risked everything to steal. They turned around, jumped back into the silver SUV, jammed the accelerator, and sped away into the night, leaving behind a trail of burning rubber and absolute horror. Kayla's friends didn't run. Despite the terrifying danger, Emma and Luann stayed right by her side. They desperately tried to put pressure on her chest wound to stop the bleeding while screaming into a cell phone to a 911 dispatcher. Within minutes, the first Cape Coral police officer arrived on the scene. He found Kayla lying on the dark asphalt, fighting for her breath. Miraculously, she was still conscious for a brief moment. The officer knelt down next to her, trying to keep her awake, and asked if she knew who did this to her. Kayla managed to whisper her final words. She said she didn't know the people who shot her. It was a completely random attack. Paramedics rushed Kayla to a local hospital, and doctors flooded the emergency room, doing everything they could to save her. But the damage from the point-blank gunshot was simply too severe. Early the next morning, 15-year-old Kayla Rincon-Miller was pronounced dead. Archival news footage from March 2024 showing police tape blocking off the Cape Coral Street, flashing blue and red lights reflecting off the trees, and a spokesperson from the Cape Coral Police Department holding a press conference. The community of Cape Coral was absolutely paralyzed with fear. This wasn't a gang dispute or a targeted hit. It was every parent's worst nightmare. A completely random killing of a child on a suburban street. The Cape Coral Police Department knew they had an absolute crisis on their hands, and they threw every available resource into finding the killers. But the detectives faced a massive hurdle right out of the gate. The two surviving girls couldn't identify the attackers because they were blinded by the high beams and the suspects were wearing masks. There were no eyewitnesses who saw the suspects' faces, and the shooting happened on a dark road with no direct home security cameras catching the license plate. So, how do you catch a ghost? You look for the digital footprints. Graphic of a cell phone tower emitting signal rings, connecting to a digital map of the city. Data streams of coordinates and timestamps begin filling the screen. The breakthrough came from surveillance cameras blocks away from the crime scene. By pulling footage from local businesses and residential ring cameras along Del Prado Boulevard, detectives managed to spot a silver SUV fleeing the area at high speed right around the exact time the 911 call came in. By tracking that vehicle across multiple cameras, they managed to get a partial look at the car. It matched a specific rental model. Cops started digging through recent local rental agreements and hit a match, a silver SUV rented by a local woman. And who was driving that car on the night of March 17? Her 16-year-old son, Thomas Stein. Once detectives had a name, they went to work on the cell phone data. They obtained warrants for the cell phone tower records in the area. When a digital forensics expert analyzed the data, the evidence was damning. Thomas Stein's cell phone had connected to towers right next to the North Fort Myers Theater when the car-hopping attempts were happening. It then tracked along the exact route to the Cape Coral Theater. And right at 9:40 p.m., Stein's phone pinged a tower directly covering the dark side street where Kayla was shot. The digital footprint perfectly mirrored the timeline of the murder. Cops picked up Thomas Stein for questioning. When investigators sat him down in an interrogation room, Stein tried to play it cool. He told the officers that he had actually learned about the murder investigation through Instagram. He claimed the whole thing was a setup and that he didn't know anything about a shooting. But when detectives started pressing him on why his car and phone were at the scene, Stein clammed up and asked for a lawyer. ending the interview. But police already had enough. Thomas Stein was arrested. Shortly after, the digital trail and cooperative tips led them straight to his accomplice, Christopher Horne Jr. Because of the sheer brutality of the crime, State Attorney Amira Fox took the case to a grand jury, bypassing juvenile court completely. Both 16-year-olds were officially indicted as adults for first-degree felony murder. Split screen showing mugshots of Thomas Stein and Christopher Horne Jr. as 16-year-olds, transitioning into footage from inside the Lee County courtroom during the 2026 trial. By the time the case finally went to trial in May of 2026, the two co-defendants were no longer standing together. Facing a potential sentence of life in prison without parole, Christopher Horne Jr. made a choice that would completely alter the course of the trial. He cut a deal with the prosecutors. Horne agreed to plead no contest to a reduced charge of second-degree murder and 3 counts of attempted robbery. In exchange for his plea, the state offered him a sentence of 25 years behind bars. But that deal came with one massive, non-negotiable condition. Horne had to take the witness stand at Thomas Stein's trial and tell the jury exactly what happened that night. When Horne took the stand, the courtroom was packed. He looked directly at the jury and pointed the finger right at Stein. Horne testified that the entire night was Stein's idea. He claimed that Stein was the one who brought the Glock pistol into the rental SUV. Horne even claimed that he had noticed the gun earlier in the evening and told Stein to take the bullets out of it because it was dangerous, but Stein refused to listen. According to Horne, when they saw the 3 girls walking, Stein stopped the car, flashed the high beams, and said they were going to rob them. Horne admitted he got out of the car with Stein, but he insisted that Thomas Stein was the one wearing the red hoodie, Stein was the one who held Kayla at gunpoint, and Stein was the one who pulled the trigger during the struggle over the purse. The defense team went on the attack during cross-examination. They hammered Horne, calling him an absolute liar who had been handed the deal of a lifetime, just to save his own skin. They argued that Horne was rewriting history to make himself look innocent while dumping all the blame on Stein. Cut to Thomas Stein walking up to the witness stand, taking the oath, and adjusted the microphone. His voice is shaky but defiant. With Horne's devastating testimony out there, Thomas Stein's defense team took a massive, high-stakes gamble. They put Thomas Stein himself on the witness stand to tell his own side of the story. In a true crime trial, having the defendant testify is always a wild card, and Stein's testimony turned the entire courtroom on its head. Stein didn't deny being there anymore. The cell phone data and the rental car records made a denial impossible. Instead, he claimed he was completely innocent of the murder. Stein testified that he was just a patsy, a scapegoat wrapped up in a crime he never wanted to happen. Stein told the jury that on the night of March 17, he was just driving around, looking to hang out with friends. He claimed that besides him and Horne, there were actually 2 other people riding in the back of the SUV, individuals he identified only by the street names, J.D. and Trey. According to Stein, the plan for the night was strictly to break into parked cars to steal cash. He claimed he had absolutely no idea that anyone in the vehicle had a gun. He testified that when he pulled over near the girls, it wasn't to rob them. He thought they were just stopping to talk to people they knew. Stein claimed that J.D. and Trey suddenly jumped out of the back seat, rushed the girls, and tried to rob them. Stein testified that he sat in the driver's seat, frozen in shock, when he suddenly heard the gunshot. He told the court, "I didn't know that a robbery was going to occur, but it was my reaction in fleeing that ultimately played a major role in assisting the perpetrators. I know that it wasn't my intentions, but the truth is it doesn't change the result. That day I made a terrible decision. The decision to get behind the wheel was a total act of selfishness. It was a clever defense strategy, designed to exploit a loophole of doubt. But the prosecution was ready to dismantle it completely." Graphic highlighting the legal definition of first-degree felony murder in Florida, breaking down the elements clearly for the audience. During closing arguments, Assistant State Attorneys Sarah Miller and Alyssa Wolf laid out a brutal reality for the jury. They argued that Stein's story about mysterious backseat passengers named J.D. and Trey was a complete fabrication, an imaginary safety net invented to dodge a life sentence. Cops had found zero forensic evidence, phone logs, or surveillance footage showing anyone else in that car besides Stein and Horne. But more importantly, the prosecutors explained a crucial piece of Florida law that every viewer needs to understand: the felony murder rule. In many states, including Florida, if a person participates in a dangerous felony, like armed robbery, and someone dies during the commission of that crime, everyone involved in the felony is legally guilty of first-degree murder. It does not matter if you didn't mean to kill anyone. It does not even matter if you weren't the person holding the gun. If you drove the getaway car, provided the weapon, or helped plan the robbery, you are just as guilty under the law as the person who pulled the trigger. The prosecution showed that Stein was the leader of the operation. He supplied the rental car, he provided the weapon, he actively drove the vehicle to look for victims, he flashed the high beams to blind the girls, and he provided the high-speed escape. He was the driving force behind the tragedy. The jury went back to deliberate. After reviewing the digital tracking data, the testimony of the surviving girls, and Horne's insider account, they reached a verdict. They found Thomas Stein guilty of first-degree felony murder and 3 counts of attempted robbery with a firearm. But there was one final, fascinating twist in the verdict sheet. When filling out the forms, the jury did not find unanimous agreement that Stein was the specific person who physically pulled the trigger. They couldn't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt whether it was Stein or Horne who fired the shot. But because of the felony murder rule, it didn't matter. Stein was legally a murderer. High-quality, dramatic footage from Friday, July 10, 2026. Thomas Stein is standing in his jail jumpsuit, listening to the surviving victims speak. The camera moves between his crying face and the stoic expression of Judge Nicholas Thompson. That brings us back to Friday, July 10, 2026, the day of reckoning. Now 18 years old, Thomas Stein stood before Judge Nicholas Thompson to learn how he would spend the rest of his life. Before the judge handed down the final numbers, Kayla's surviving friends stood up to deliver their victim impact statements. Emma Wright told the court how her life had been completely derailed by that night. She spoke about the trauma of watching her best friend die on the asphalt and the cruelty of online bullies who actually tried to blame the girls for walking in the dark. Luann DJ delivered a gut-wrenching statement that left the courtroom silent. She told the judge, "I feel like I'm trapped in a coma that I can't wake up from. Like I'm suffocating, but somehow still expected to keep on living. Losing Kayla changed every part of my life." When it was Stein's turn to speak, the tough guy facade completely collapsed. He broke down on the witness stand, weeping openly. He turned to Kayla's family, apologizing for the pain his actions had caused, insisting again that he was not a monster and never intended for anyone to die. But prosecutors reminded the judge of Stein's history. Even at 16, he already had prior felony convictions for burglary and breaking into cars. They showed that he had been making rap videos online glorifying crime and firearms. They told the judge, "Thomas Stein is the bad influence. He was the driver. He armed the parties. He's the one who identified the targets, the girls who were walking down a dark road alone." Judge Nicholas Thompson showed no mercy. First, for the charge of first-degree felony murder, he sentenced Stein to life in prison. Because Stein was only 16 years old when the crime occurred, Florida law requires that he be given a judicial rehabilitation review after serving 15 years to see if he has changed. But Judge Thompson wasn't done. He then addressed the 3 counts of attempted robbery with a firearm. For those crimes, the judge handed down 3 separate 15-year sentences, totaling an additional 45 years. And crucially, the judge ruled that these 45 years must be served consecutively, meaning they only start after the murder sentence. Stein's defense attorney, Robert Malove, openly protested the sentence in court, realizing the mathematical trap the judge had just set. Even if a future court reviews Stein's case in 15 years and decides he is completely rehabilitated from the murder charge, his life sentence doesn't just end, he must immediately begin serving the mandatory 45-year robbery sentence. Effectively, Thomas Stein will spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. Close-up of the bailiff approaching Stein with handcuffs. Stein turns to the gallery, his face red from crying. As the reality of the sentence washed over him, Stein made one final, desperate emotional appeal to the bench. He looked up at Judge Thompson and asked, "If I could just ask you one thing, before I walk out of the courtroom, if I could give my family a hug, if you'd allow that?" The request was met with an immediate, cold refusal. Judge Thompson replied, "I can't grant that request in here. You can say goodbye, but you can't have any physical contact." Due to strict courthouse security protocols, physical contact with convicted felons is strictly forbidden. Stein was forced to just look at his family one last time before the bailiffs led him through the heavy metal doors, cementing his transition from a free teenager to an inmate for life. Kayla Rincon-Miller's family expressed that this massive sentence didn't bring them joy, victory, or peace, only a sense of finality. A young girl is still gone, and a family is left picking up the pieces. In the wake of this tragedy, Kayla's mother has dedicated her life to building Kayla's House, a non-profit organization aimed at keeping young kids off the streets, providing mentorship, and combating the rising tide of teen gun violence in Florida, ensuring that Kayla's name stands for protection rather than tragedy. The documentary footage fades out, replaced by a clean, modern YouTube end-screen graphic. Text overlays appear showing a subscribe button and links to other videos. This case is a terrifying reminder of how a single chain of poor choices, greed, and recklessness can destroy multiple lives in a matter of seconds. Thomas Stein and Christopher Horne Jr. went out looking to make a quick buck from parked cars, and ended up ruining their own futures and stealing the life of an innocent 15-year-old girl. But what do you think about the judge's final sentence? Do you think the consecutive 45-year penalty on top of the life sentence was a fair application of justice, or do you think the 15-year rehabilitation review should have given him a realistic second chance at freedom? And how do you feel about the felony murder rule itself? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I read every single one. If you found this deep dive into the case valuable and well-researched, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and tells the algorithm to push this story out to more people. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming true crime documentaries. Share this video with anyone who loves deep, investigative crime stories.